Chapter 7 Home Again. Poppy and her father did not talk on the long way home. Only occasionally did she say, "Watch the puddle, Papa, or it won't be long now." That was all. Lungwort, walking with his head down, eyes glued to his feet, kept uttering sighs. Now and then he reached up to touch his hat, just to be sure it was there. Once, after stealing a look at Poppy, a look that she caught, he let out something like a moan. Poppy was fearful of asking her father the question she kept asking herself. If Mr. Ocox refused permission for the move, and he had, and if there was not enough food, and her father said that was true, what was the family to do? Would some of them have to forage in distant places in the open? That meant they'd be at the mercy of Mr. Ocox, a complete calamity. Poppy peeked again at Ragweed's earring. She kept asking herself why she had ever gone to the hill with Ragweed. Without asking permission, she knew better. Look at all the trouble she caused. Just then she hated herself for having loved Ragweed. But just to think that thought made her heart ache. Rain was still falling when they reached Grey House. Both mice were soaked and exhausted. The once white flag trailed in the mud. A large number of mice were milling about on the porch waiting for the expected good news. Sure enough, when Poppy and Lungwort appeared, a cheer went up. The sound brought Lungwort to a dead halt. The old mouse stared blankly at the rows of eager faces. A second cheer began, but faded as the onlookers sensed something was wrong. Silent and grim-faced, eyes averted, Lungwort painfully climbed the Grey House steps, alarmed into silence. The mice backed away to let him pass. Poppy saw her mother break through the crowd. "Lungwort," she cried. "Oh, my dear, what happened?" Lungwort lifted sad eyes. Without a word, he continued on into the house, retreating into his boot study and drawing the curtain behind him. For a moment, sweet Cicely stared after her husband. Then she dashed into the boot after him. Only then did the others notice Poppy. She had been standing alone, quiet, quite ignored. Now they surrounded her and pelted her with questions. "What's happened? Is something the matter? What's with Lungwort? What did Mr. Ocock say?" Poppy, not sure how to reply, remained silent. Finally, she held up a paw, her father's gesture. The mice responded as they always did. They grew quiet. Swallowing hard, Poppy said, "Mr. Ocox refused permission for anyone to move." Like air escaping from a balloon, there was a collective gasp from the crowd. But a torrent of questions followed. What did Mr. Ocock say? Did Longmore explain? What are we supposed to do now? Did the owl give any reasons? Poppy lifted a paw again. Once the crowd had stilled, she confessed softly. Mr. Ocock said it was because Ragweed and I didn't ask permission to go to Bannock Hill. She hoped for a chorus, or at least one mouse, who would say, "That's not fair," or "That's absurd." No such word was spoken. Alarmed, Poppy looked around. Some eyes avoided hers. Others showed sorrow. Quite a few darted angry glares at her. "You'll have to excuse me now," she murmured, quite shaken. "I need to get myself dry." A narrow passage was made for her to pass. As she entered the house, she felt a nudge from behind. Alarmed, she jumped. It was Basil. "This way," he whispered. He led her into an isolated room. "Dry yourself," he said. "I'll get you something hot." Placing Ragweed's earring to one side, Poppy began licking her fur dry. By the time she was done, Basil returned with an acorn of steaming mashed rye. Despite her upset, Poppy ate ravenously, grateful for the warmth that seeped through her body. Basil listened intently as Poppy told of the meeting with Mr. Ocox. "And look what I found," she held up Ragweed's earring. Basil took it carefully. "Where was it?" "Sticking out of one of Mr. Ocox's pellets." "Makes me sick," he muttered. After a while, he asked, "Poppy, what's going to happen next?" Poppy sighed. "I thought it would have been impossible to feel worse than I did when Ragweed died. I was wrong. This is worse. So many will suffer. And guess who's being blamed? Me." Wearily, Poppy made her way to the attic. She wanted to be alone. Amid Farmer Lamet's clutter, she'd come across a tin can a while ago shaped like a house. "Log Cabin Syrup," the label read, after cleaning the inside to a shiny newness and lining it with her favorite old magazine bits. Poppy considered it her own room.